Hey there everyone, this is Evil Monkey here to bring you another first Descendant build video. This one's for Blair using Truly Deadly Cuisine. Now this is a boss killing build but can also be used across general content. Nice thing about this build is it puts your fourth ability, your highest damage ability, on an 8-second cooldown. So if you don't kill something in the first try, you can kill it in the second try. Alright, but let's just hop right into this, because I'm sure you guys just want to see the build. So to start off with, I thought I'd show you guys all the abilities and which ones changed. But if you just want to dive directly into the build part of the video, you can go ahead and skip to the next section, which would be the mod section, because that's where the build will actually start. But yeah, these will be ability breakdown. Let's get into it. Truly Deadly Cuisine doesn't actually change player's passive at all, but this is probably the most important part of the kit, as it sets up a lot of what you do with Blair's build here. So for Pitmaster, Blair's passive, each flame wheel you throw on the ground, or flame zone, increases his crit base value by 5%, up to a max stack of 5, so it's 25% total. And if you use a skill against anything that's on fire, you get additional 10% base crit damage. Blair's first ability does stay the same as its Blaze Up. This creates a flame zone at your feet. You have 3 stacks. Now, the nice thing with this build is, as you throw one out, you can pretty much just infinitely throw them out. Once you cast it, it's already basically off cooldown, so you can just infinitely cast. The other funny thing is, if you throw one flame zone on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, the damage actually does stack. So if you throw one flame zone on the ground, enemies will take, one tick of flame zone damage. If you stack 50 flame zones on top of one another, the enemy will take 50 ticks of flame zone damage. It is a fun thing. It doesn't really do much because the flame zone scaling is kind of low, but it is a fun interaction you can do with players. Blair's second ability, Extinguish, also stays the same. All this does is, based off the number of flame zones on the ground, you get buffs, and you also get mana back. For each flame zone on the ground, you get 8% of your mana back, so if you have 5 on the ground, which would be the max stacks, you'll end up getting 40% of your mana back. This is why you don't need to worry about mana with this build, because you can just pretty much infinitely cycle your mana and get it back as much as you need it. Blair's third ability also stays the same, because this module, Truly Deadly Cuisine, actually only changes one ability. It is going to be the most important one, but we'll get to that in a second. For the flamethrower, this is going to be your main AoE wave clear. You just shoot a flamethrower out of your hand, as you can see on the screen. It does decent damage, and can kill most common enemies and a lot of elites in a few ticks. And finally, the one ability that actually did change was Truly Deadly Cuisine, your fourth ability. But it's a pretty big change. So what this does is they up the scaling to 17,000%. Well, a little bit over that. And also, when you throw the fireball, it no longer creates flame zones on the ground. So you exchange the utility for more damage. But this will allow you to one-shot a lot of bosses and pretty much kill anything in the game. Okay, now that we've shown off all the abilities that have changed and how they work, let's go ahead and hop directly into the mods and show you guys the actual build itself. So let's start with the cooldown mods and why we're running 3 cooldown mods, and also focus on dimension, which gives us a little bit more cooldown. But we'll talk about focus on dimension later. The reason why you're running so much cooldowns is to get you to around 90% cooldown, which is the max cooldown. This allows you to cycle your fourth ability, the one with the high scaling in this build, on about an 8-second cooldown. Now this is really good because it looks like content that's coming out and future content are all leaning towards bosses that are less one-shottable and take a few cycles of abilities. Now this ability does a lot of damage. And this will help you deal with that, such as the Ice Main Abyss Challenge mode, or Sigma Sector, which has multi-stage bosses. This will just help with all that. Now the reason we run MP conversion is because you don't really care about your mana. Blair can basically get infinite mana, because he can just cycle through his abilities with his Extinguish and just keep regenerating his mana. Multi-talented, because 3 of Blair's abilities are Dimension, and if you use a Dimension ability multi-talented, you get a huge burst of cooldown. And then Nimble Fingers is just your basic cooldown abilities. Next, let's talk about why we're actually running 3 crit modules instead of 4. So as we went over in the last section, where I showed off Blair's abilities, his passive gives you increased skill crit here, based off your flame wells. Well, this adds to the base. Between this, Arche Tree, you can actually get 100% crit rate fairly easily. And this gets you almost exactly 100% crit rate. It's just slightly over, because you'd rather be over than under. And this also maximizes crit damage with some of the other stuff we're going to have later in the build, getting you over 5 times crit damage. Which, since Blair is a skill crit character, this is very, very effective to have in your kit. So all this crit in the build would be fairly useless without the skill power to back up our 17,000% scaling on our 4th ability. And for that we run 2 skill power modules. Well, we run focus on Dimension, which is a skill power modifier one, but we run this for slightly more damage and for the cooldown to get around that 90% cooldown that we want. Then we run Fire Specialist because this is going to give you the biggest bang for your buck in skill power. You don't want to run Fire or Focus on Fire because this would be kind of useless considering we already have Focus on Dimension, and you do want that little bit extra skill power that you can get from this one. This will allow you to do as much damage as possible along with the rest of the build. Now, some of you may have realized I skipped over 2 mods in this build. That's because that skill expansion and skill extension are actually 2 free slots that you have. You can change those out with anything you want to. These 2 modules are not necessary to the build, so if you want to throw in more HP to be tankier, shields, defense, or if you want more duration, more range extension, whatever you want, you can throw it in there. I personally run 1 skill expansion, 1 skill extension, so my flame wells last longer, and my flamethrower has slightly more range for some more utility if I don't want to have to worry about being right next to the boss, or if I want a little bit more wave clear with the build. But yeah, you can run pretty much anything you want in those 2 slots. They are not mandatory to the build, so you have 2 free module slots that you can just exchange with whatever you want to. The next major part of the build is, of course, the Arche Tree. So let's get right into the Arche Tree. It's pretty simplistic. Pretty much it just gets all the damage possible. As you see, it hits every major node of skill power with the double purple and the gold, along with grabbing the crit rate to once again hit 100% crit rate, and also the crit damage. And that's pretty much it. It's just grab as much damage as you can, and that's what this one does. But the thing everyone's probably most curious about is the Mutant Cell. There are actually 2 different Mutant Cells you can run here. You can run Arche Overheat Shield, which gives you additional skill crit damage if your shield's above 50% or higher, which is really good for Ice Maiden Abyss fight challenge mode because she cannot be inflicted with burn, which is what our other Mutant Cell burn vulnerability needs to be able to get additional skill power. But burn vulnerability makes sense in most content as you're going to be lighting most enemies on fire, inflicting them with burn, since Blair's passive already requires that for you to get additional crit damage from his passive. But you can run either one here, as they both work with the build. Additional skill power works really well with your 17,000% scaling, and the overheat shield works really well with Blair being a crit character. I personally run overheat shield, but this one can be hard to manage as once again you have to keep your shield above 50%. But you can just run shield regen to help with this. We'll talk about that more later in the video. Now for the reactor, what you're going to want is a fire dimension reactor. This is because Blair is of course a fire descendant. As we said before, all 3 of his damage abilities are dimension based, and his one ability that's not is a non-damage one. It's a utility. So you really want dimension here. And then for substats, you're going to want skill crit damage and either fire skill power boost or dimension skill power boost. It doesn't matter which one of those 2 as long as it's paired with skill crit damage. The reason you want only damage in this is because number 1, you want to maximize the damage for this build. But the other reason is we get all the cooldown and crit that we really need. Well, crit rate that we need. We need crit damage, of course, from your mods and your Arche Tree in this build. You really don't need any other utility, so you just want the most damage you can get, which happens to be skill crit damage and one of the skill power boosts. After your reactor, of course, you're going to want to work on your component set. For this one, it's going to be Slayer set, This is because Slayer gives you the most amount of skill power possible, since there's no fire-specific skill power component set in the game yet. There is one that allows you to lower the resistance, but this has varying usability as it depends on how much fire resistance the enemy has. For example, if an enemy has really high fire resistance, you're probably just going to use another Descendant. And if they have really low fire resistance, this is just going to not be as effective. And then for the mana cost, you're not really going to care because once again, as we said before, Blair can go ahead and recycle his mana as much as needed. So you don't really care about the mana cost up. Now for your substats, you're going to want fire resistant HP. This is because Blair has really high HP value, and fire resistance is pretty much the only useful stat there. For your next one, you're going to want MP recovery. This just allows you to get more mana when you use extinguish to get your mana back. Just returns more, which is useful. And shield recovery in combat will help if you're running Arche Overshield. If you're not running Arche Overheat Shield, instead of running Burn Vulnerability, you don't really need this. You can just exchange it out for whatever you want. But if you are going to run Arche Overheat Shield, this will help you keep your shield above 50%. So you can regen if it goes down. For the next one, recovery out of combat for shields. Once again, this is just purely for Arche Overheat Shield, so you can get your shields back up quicker. Chill resistance is nice because you're mainly going to be fighting enemies that are ice-based with this kind of build, since, well, I mean, you will fight multiple types of enemies, but if you're going to kill bosses, you're probably going to use this against, an ice boss or a chill boss, And then for the last one, shield recovery modifier. Once again, this is useful for Arche Overheat Shield, get your shields back quicker, but if you're running Burn Vulnerability, you can exchange this out for whatever you want. And then toxic resistance just, helps you be beefier. So for your component cores, these are going to change depending on whatever mutant cell you're running. If you're running Arche Overheat Shield, you're going to run 2 shield recovery in combat. This will help keep your shields above that 50% value if they take damage or go down. This will just help you get that passive going. And then after that, you're going to want to run 2 max HP ups. This is because Blair has one of the higher HP base values in the game, so this will give you the most defensive stats you can get. Now, the reason why you're not running max shield up is because Blair has really low base shields. So it's not really going to help too much. So instead, the idea is you want to run as low as shields as possible. So if you take shield damage, you're going to get your shields back a lot faster by that 50% value. In fact, if you can get your shields as low as possible, it's going to help a lot. But don't forget, Arche Overheat Shield doesn't work if shield max value is 1. So you need to keep it above 1, but try to keep it as low as max value as possible. Because also shield recovery in combat isn't percentage, it's just a stat value that we have going up. So as you can see right here, one of these stats is 3.7 per second. Now if instead you're running Burn Vulnerability, you're going to just want to run 4 max HP ups. Because you're not going to care about shields, and once again, Blair has really high max HP values. So it's just going to raise it even higher. You're going to get your most defensive stats. Now, no matter which one of those mutant cells you do run, for your blue stats on your component cores, what you're instead going to want to run is, like I said, for either one, Burn Vulnerability or Arche Overheat Shield. These blue cores stay the same. You're going to want to run 1 defense and 3 chill resistance. This is because you don't really need super high defense values right now. This is already going to get you insanely high. You can run 2 defense values if you want. That's just preference. But chill resistance will just help you stay alive. That's basically it. That's why you're also running the base chill resistance in your Slayer substats. This will basically help you cover a lot of the defensive values that you're going to need when tackling bosses or future content. So weapons in this build are pretty basic, because you've got so much cooldown, you're really just never going to use a gun in the first place. You're pretty much only going to be casting abilities. So you really only want either A, utility guns that give you movement speed, such as Peacemaker or Python, since those can run a lot of movement speed cores, or B, something like Truly Deadly Arson, which can, catch your enemies on fire really quickly to give you that additional crit damage. That's pretty much it. You don't really care about your weapon. So movement speed, or you can light someone on fire with the gun. So how do you play this build? Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. You summon a miniature sun, and you just throw that at your enemies. I mean, you literally drop a sun on them. No. In all seriousness, okay, the way you kill bosses with this is pretty simple. What you want to do is, as the boss is getting summoned into the room, grapple to where they're going to get spawned, use your first ability to throw 5 flame walls on the ground so you can get your max crit. And then you're going to want to use your second ability, Extinguish, to get yourself buff. Then when the boss actually spawns, use your fourth ability to throw a miniature sun at them. And this one-shots most bosses, but if for whatever reason it doesn't one-shot, like it doesn't crit, or, you know, it's some new boss that maybe has way too much health, that's fine. Because in 8 seconds, that ability's back off cooldown, so if you didn't kill it the first try, well, the second sun you drop on him will. And a little note, technically the cooldown for this, your fourth ability, does actually start ticking as soon as you cast the ability. It's not at the end, it's at the beginning. So in reality, after you throw the ability, you only have about 6 or 7 seconds until your next cast. Pretty short. Now, for when you want to take this build into general content, it doesn't change too much. It's pretty much the same. You want to throw 5 flame walls on the ground to get your crit. Also, your flame walls and your third ability, so your first and third, you're going to be your wave clear. Most enemies that run into your flame walls are just going to die. Most enemies are pretty weak. Well, at least common enemies. And your flamethrower is really good at just killing elites. About 1 to 3 ticks from your flamethrower will kill pretty much any elite. Anything that's too tanky, you just use your fourth ability. And then also don't forget to spam your second ability, Extinguish. This will get you your mana back and keep your buffs going, and also give you a movement speed boost. For those of you who are wondering where you get this mod, Truly Deadly Cuisine, well, you can get it from pretty much anywhere in Hagios. But the best place to farm it would be Hagios Old Mystery. I would personally wait for a 400% dungeon to appear there. This will give you the most amount of enemies and the highest drop rate possible. And that's gonna go ahead and wrap it up for this Blair Truly Deadly Cuisine build video. If you guys have any comments or questions about the build, go ahead and hit me up below the video in the comment section. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. I also stream every day on Twitch. I'll go through the link there if you want to discuss anything there. Always happy to discuss first Descendant. And I appreciate y'all watching this video. Alright, I'll catch y'all later.